The champagne glass shattered against the marble floor at exactly 8:47 p.m. Conversations stopped in the middle of sentences. The violinists lowered their bows. Even the waiters froze beside the towering gold-trimmed walls of the Harrison estate as the sharp sound of a slap echoed through the ballroom with the kind of force that makes people remember where they were years later. Guests turned slowly toward the center of the room where Caroline Whitmore stood breathing heavily, one hand still raised in the air, her diamond engagement ring glittering beneath the crystal chandeliers above her. In front of her, an elderly woman struggled to steady herself after the impact, her frail body leaning slightly against a silver serving table as stunned silence spread across the mansion like a sudden winter storm. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Nearly 300 wealthy guests watched the scene unfold in complete disbelief, while champagne dripped quietly from overturned glasses onto the polished floor beneath their feet. Caroline's voice broke the silence first. "How dare you touch me?" she shouted, her face burning with anger as she pointed directly at the older woman standing before her. The guests exchanged nervous looks.
Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, Trash Tea. Get comfortable and enjoy the amazing movie till the very end. You definitely don't want to miss any part of it. While watching, please drop a comment and let us know where you are watching from. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Thank you.
In the middle of the ballroom with fury written across her face, she looked nothing like the graceful woman displayed on magazine covers. She looked frightened, angry, exposed, and the elderly woman she had just slapped did not react the way anyone expected. She did not cry. She did not yell. Instead, she slowly lifted her eyes toward Caroline with a calm expression that unsettled everyone watching. It was the kind of expression that carried history inside it. Pain, wisdom, and something else nobody in that room understood yet. Then came the voice that changed everything. "What the hell just happened here?" The words cut through the ballroom with deadly calm. Guests immediately stepped aside as Ethan Harrison pushed through the crowd, confusion already hardening into concern the moment he noticed the terrified expressions around him. But the second his eyes landed on the elderly woman standing beside the serving table, his entire body froze. The color drained from his face so quickly that several guests later claimed they thought he might collapse. His breathing changed. His jaw tightened, and for a long moment Ethan Harrison stared at the woman as though the rest of the ballroom had disappeared completely. Caroline turned toward him, desperate to explain herself, but the words died in her throat when she saw the look in his eyes. It was not anger at first. It was heartbreak, pure heartbreak. The elderly woman lowered her gaze quietly, almost as if she already knew what was about to happen next. Then Ethan finally spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. "Mom!" The entire ballroom erupted into stunned murmurs. One woman covered her mouth in shock. A waiter nearly dropped an entire tray of champagne flutes. Caroline herself took a small step backward as though the floor beneath her feet had suddenly vanished. Because the woman she had just humiliated in front of hundreds of guests was not a servant. She was Ethan Harrison's mother. And in less than 10 seconds, one violent decision destroyed an engagement, exposed secrets buried for decades, and turned the most glamorous night of New York's elite social season into a nightmare nobody inside that mansion would ever forget. But what shocked people even more was what happened after the slap. Because while the guests stood frozen in disbelief, Eleanor Harrison slowly straightened her posture and looked around the ballroom with eyes that no longer appeared weak or fragile. There was something commanding about her now, something powerful. The quiet elderly woman everyone ignored suddenly carried a presence so heavy that even the wealthiest people in the room seemed uncomfortable beneath her gaze. And what nobody there understood yet was that Eleanor Harrison had spent months hiding the truth about who she really was, not because she was ashamed, but because she was waiting, watching, testing the woman her son planned to marry. Before we go deeper into this unbelievable story, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. For nearly 30 seconds after the slap, nobody inside the Harrison estate seemed capable of moving. The ballroom remained trapped in silence while guests struggled to understand what they had just witnessed. Adrian Cole stood beside his mother without blinking, his eyes fixed on Veronica Hale with a look so cold that several people quietly stepped away from the couple. Just minutes earlier, the two of them had looked like the perfect image of power and success. America's favorite billionaire bachelor and the glamorous woman expected to become his wife. Their engagement party had been covered by business magazines, celebrity blogs, and luxury lifestyle reporters for weeks. Cameras lined the entrance outside the estate. Politicians, investors, actors, and social elites filled the mansion that night. Everything had been carefully planned down to the smallest detail. The music, the lighting, the custom diamond ring reportedly worth over $2 million. It was supposed to be the beginning of a new dynasty. Instead, it became the moment everything started falling apart. Adrian Cole was not the type of man who raised his voice often. At 42 years old, he had built one of the largest private investment firms in the country from almost nothing. Financial networks called him disciplined. Newspapers described him as brilliant but difficult to read. Employees feared disappointing him because of how calm he remained under pressure. He never shouted during meetings, never lost control in public, never allowed emotions to cloud his judgment. But people who knew Adrian personally understood there was one exception to every rule he lived by. His mother. Evelyn Cole was the only person who could reach the part of Adrian he spent years hiding from the world. Long before the private jets, billion-dollar acquisitions, and magazine interviews, there had only been the two of them surviving inside a cramped apartment in South Boston after Adrian's father died unexpectedly when he was 11 years old. Evelyn worked double shifts cleaning offices overnight while raising her son alone, refusing help from anyone even when they barely had enough money to survive. Adrian never forgot that. Not once. And according to people closest to him, he carried guilt for those difficult years long after becoming wealthy. That was why the scene unfolding inside the ballroom made no sense to many of the guests attending the party. Why was Adrian's mother standing alone carrying a serving tray moments before being slapped? Why had nobody recognized her? And perhaps even more confusing, why had Adrian never introduced her publicly before? For years, people speculated about the billionaire's private life. Reporters uncovered business rivals, former relationships, lawsuits, and investments worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Yet somehow, very little was known about Evelyn Cole. Some believed she lived overseas. Others claimed she was ill and avoided public appearances entirely. A few even questioned whether Adrian had intentionally hidden his family background to protect his carefully built image among New York's elite circles. But the truth was far more complicated than anyone realized that night. Then there was Veronica Hale. At 36 years old, Veronica moved through high society like someone born to rule it. Beautiful, intelligent, polished, and endlessly photographed at charity galas and luxury events, she understood how to command attention the moment she entered a room. But beneath the designer gowns and flawless public smile was a woman obsessed with control. Friends described her as charming until things stopped going her way. Former assistants quietly spoke about impossible demands, emotional outbursts, and sudden firings over minor mistakes. Yet somehow Veronica always protected her reputation. People excused her behavior because of her beauty, her wealth, and the powerful family she came from. Her father, Richard Hale, had spent decades building connections inside political and financial circles across the country, and Veronica grew up understanding one lesson better than anything else. Status was everything. Appearances mattered more than truth. Weakness was dangerous, and ordinary people existed beneath her. Which raised an even darker question. If Veronica loved Adrian enough to marry him, how could she fail to recognize the woman who raised him? The answer disturbed people once they started piecing together the truth. because according to several sources close to the family, Veronica had never shown interest in learning about Adrian's life before his success. She loved the billionaire, the empire, the influence, but the painful history behind the empire made her uncomfortable. Adrian rarely spoke publicly about his childhood poverty, and Veronica preferred it that way. To her, the past did not fit the future she imagined for herself, and Evelyn Cole understood that long before the engagement party ever happened. But perhaps the most chilling mystery surrounding that night was Evelyn herself. Quiet, observant, soft-spoken, the elderly woman rarely interrupted conversations during the few times guests remembered seeing her earlier in the evening. Yet there was something strangely deliberate about the way she moved through the ballroom. Several witnesses later recalled catching her watching Veronica closely throughout the night, almost as though she had arrived at the mansion searching for answers instead of celebrating her son's engagement. And what nobody knew then was that Evelyn Cole had spent weeks hiding a secret so explosive it threatened to destroy not only Adrian's relationship, but the entire foundation of the Hale family's reputation. Because this wasn't the first time Veronica Hale had humiliated someone. Before the penthouses overlooking Manhattan, before the interviews on financial television, before politicians and celebrities competed for invitations to his private events, Adrian Cole was simply a frightened boy sitting alone in the back corner of a crowded diner waiting for his mother to finish another late-night shift. People who knew Adrian during those early years often described him as unusually quiet, the kind of child who watched everything carefully before speaking. After his father's death, silence became a survival skill. Evelyn Cole suddenly found herself raising an 11-year-old boy with overdue bills piling across their kitchen table and barely enough food to stretch through the week. There were nights she skipped meals entirely, so Adrian would never notice how desperate things had become. Winters were especially brutal. The apartment heating failed constantly, forcing Evelyn to warm water on the stove, while Adrian pretended not to see her crying quietly after midnight when she thought he was asleep. Years later, after becoming one of the wealthiest businessmen in America, Adrian still refused to talk publicly about those nights, but people close to him understood something important. Every decision he made as an adult was shaped by the memory of watching his mother sacrifice her entire life to protect him from poverty. Evelyn worked anywhere she could find employment, morning shifts at diners, afternoon cleaning offices downtown, overnight housekeeping jobs inside hotels where wealthy guests barely acknowledged her existence. Some weeks she slept less than 4 hours a night. Yet despite the exhaustion permanently visible beneath her eyes, she never allowed Adrian to believe they were victims. She constantly reminded him that dignity mattered more than money. According to one former neighbor, Evelyn used to tell her son, "People can survive being poor. What destroys people is forgetting how to treat others once they stop struggling." Adrian carried those words into adulthood more than anyone realized. Even after his financial empire exploded across the country, he remained fiercely loyal to the people who helped him rise. Old coworkers received jobs inside his company. Former neighbors quietly received anonymous financial support. Waitresses at the diner where Evelyn once worked found their children's college tuition mysteriously paid in full. Adrian never publicly admitted any of it. He simply handled loyalty the same way his mother handled hardship, quietly. By the age of 32, Adrian Cole had transformed a struggling construction startup into a billion-dollar investment empire. Business reporters praised his discipline, his patience, and his ability to negotiate impossible deals without showing emotion. Investors trusted him because he appeared stable in a world filled with reckless personalities. But success created another problem Adrian never fully solved: isolation. The richer he became, the smaller his circle grew. Genuine relationships became difficult to trust. Women pursued his money. Business partners pursued influence. Friends slowly became employees, clients, or strangers asking for favors. Behind the luxury lifestyle most people envied was a man carrying loneliness so deep that even Evelyn quietly worried about him. Then Veronica Hale entered his life, and for the first time in years, Adrian appeared genuinely happy. Veronica came from a completely different world. She grew up surrounded by old money, private schools, country clubs, and elite social circles where wealth determined value long before personality ever mattered. Her mother, Margaret Hale, built her reputation around appearances and social influence, and she raised Veronica with a brutal understanding of how power worked. Family friends later recalled hearing Margaret repeat the same lesson throughout Veronica's childhood. Respect rich people. Fear powerful people. Ignore everyone else. It sounded cold, but inside their world it was treated like survival advice. Veronica absorbed every word. She learned how to dress perfectly before she turned 16, learned how to speak carefully around wealthy investors, learned how to identify expensive watches, luxury cars, and designer brands at a glance. Most importantly, she learned how to judge people instantly based on status. To Veronica, appearance revealed worth. Wealth meant intelligence. Power deserved admiration. Ordinary people existed in the background. At first, Adrian and Veronica looked unstoppable together. Financial magazines called them America's next billionaire power couple. Their photographs appeared everywhere. Luxury vacations in Italy, charity galas in Los Angeles, exclusive yacht parties in Miami. Veronica understood how to stand beside Adrian in public without overshadowing him, and Adrian appreciated how effortlessly she handled high society attention he secretly disliked. Friends described their relationship as glamorous, polished, almost cinematic, but privately, subtle cracks already existed beneath the surface. Veronica disliked being around people she considered beneath their social status. She became irritated whenever Adrian spent time reconnecting with old friends from Boston. She once questioned why he continued supporting former employees financially instead of moving on from people tied to struggle. Adrian usually ignored comments like that. Sometimes he defended people gently. Other times he simply stayed quiet to avoid conflict. But there were moments others noticed immediately. A waiter accidentally spilled sparkling water near Veronica during a charity dinner in Chicago, and witnesses claimed she publicly humiliated him until he nearly cried. At another event, she reportedly mocked a hotel receptionist's accent while laughing with friends moments later. Employees inside Adrian's company learned quickly that Veronica expected special treatment everywhere she went. Personal assistants rarely lasted more than a few months around her. Drivers complained privately about insults. Restaurant staff dreaded serving her table. Yet Adrian continued dismissing concerns from people around him because loneliness changes what people are willing to tolerate. After spending years building walls around himself emotionally, Adrian desperately wanted the life he believed Veronica represented: stability, partnership, family, normalcy. He convinced himself her flaws were temporary, stress-related, misunderstood. Evelyn Cole, however, noticed the warning signs almost immediately. Unlike Adrian, Evelyn understood how people behave when they believe nobody important is watching. She paid attention to small things. The way Veronica ignored housekeeping staff inside hotels, the impatience in her voice around elderly workers, the forced smile she used whenever conversations shifted toward Adrian's childhood or family history. Evelyn never openly confronted her son about these concerns at first because she saw how happy he appeared around Veronica. But privately, her uneasiness continued growing stronger. Several months before the engagement party, one longtime house employee reportedly overheard Evelyn quietly say something chilling while watching Veronica criticize a server during dinner. "That woman doesn't love people," she whispered softly. "She loves power." And inside the Harrison estate on the night of the engagement party, while guests celebrated beneath crystal chandeliers and champagne towers, one servant standing near the ballroom entrance leaned toward another employee and whispered words that would later haunt everyone who heard them. If Miss Veronica ever met his mother, everything would collapse. The Harrison estate had hosted politicians, royalty, film stars, and billion-dollar negotiations over the years. But even longtime employees admitted they had never seen the mansion transformed the way it looked on the night of Adrian Cole and Veronica Hale's engagement celebration. The property stretched across nearly 12 acres overlooking the Hudson River, surrounded by iron gates, private security, fountains illuminated by golden lights, and rows of imported white roses flown in from Europe less than 24 hours before the event began. Luxury cars lined the circular entrance for almost a mile, while photographers waited outside hopping to capture even a glimpse of the guest list arriving through the gates. Inside the ballroom, crystal chandeliers reflected against polished marble floors, while servers moved carefully between guests carrying silver trays filled with champagne and caviar. A live orchestra performed near the grand staircase beneath towering floral arrangements that reportedly cost more than most American homes. Every detail screamed wealth, power, prestige. This was not simply an engagement party. It was a public display of influence, designed to remind everyone in attendance that Adrian Cole and Veronica Hale belonged among the most powerful couples in the country. The guest list alone could have filled headlines for weeks. Governors, hedge fund executives, celebrities, former professional athletes, luxury fashion designers, and international investors crowded the ballroom exchanging smiles and business cards while cameras captured every glamorous detail. Veronica moved effortlessly through the crowd in a custom silver gown that shimmered beneath the chandeliers each time she turned her head. She looked exactly like the woman high society magazines worshipped. Elegant, confident, untouchable. Beside her, Adrian appeared composed as always, shaking hands politely while executives congratulated him on the engagement. But despite the music, the laughter, and the endless praise surrounding him that night, Adrian's attention drifted repeatedly toward the entrance doors throughout the evening. He checked his watch constantly. Several people noticed it. One investor later recalled thinking, Adrian looked nervous in a way that felt strangely personal, almost like he was waiting for someone whose opinion mattered more to him than anyone else inside the mansion. That person was Adrian Cole. Very few people attending the party knew Adrian had personally asked his mother to come. In fact, several members of his own executive team believed she would not attend at all. Evelyn rarely appeared at public events, especially those involving cameras or wealthy social circles. She preferred quiet places, familiar people, simpler environments. Adrian understood that, which was why he sounded almost relieved when she finally agreed to attend the engagement celebration after weeks of hesitation. But according to someone close to the family, Evelyn accepted only after making one unusual request. "Don't announce me," she reportedly told her son. "I just want to see your happiness quietly." Adrian agreed without hesitation. He believed his mother simply wanted to avoid attention. What he did not realize was that Evelyn had another reason for remaining unnoticed that night. Shortly after 8 o'clock, a black sedan quietly pulled beside the side entrance of the estate, while most guests remained distracted inside the ballroom. Evelyn stepped out wearing a modest dark blue dress she had owned for years, along with a small silver necklace hidden beneath her coat. Nothing about her appearance reflected the luxury surrounding the mansion that evening. She carried herself with quiet dignity, but among guests covered in diamonds and designer labels, she looked painfully ordinary. One young employee standing near the entrance later admitted he mistakenly tried directing Evelyn toward the service corridor because he assumed she worked for the catering company. Evelyn smiled politely and corrected him without embarrassment. "I'm here for the party," she said softly before walking inside alone. For the first 20 minutes, almost nobody paid attention to her. That was partly because Evelyn preferred staying near the edges of the ballroom where she could observe without interrupting conversations. She watched Adrian carefully from a distance as he greeted guests, and more than once, witnesses recalled seeing genuine warmth in her expression whenever he laughed. To Evelyn, the expensive chandeliers and celebrity guests meant nothing. Her son's happiness was the only thing that mattered. But the longer she remained inside the ballroom, the clearer another reality became. Veronica Hale noticed everything and everyone around her, especially people who did not belong. It started with small looks across the room, quick glances toward Evelyn standing alone near serving tables, subtle expressions of irritation whenever guests accidentally mistook Evelyn for part of the catering staff. Veronica never approached her directly at first, but employees later admitted they could sense her annoyance growing throughout the evening. At approximately 8:43 p.m., one of the catering staff asked Evelyn if she could briefly help carry a tray toward the ballroom entrance while another employee handled an emergency in the kitchen. Evelyn agreed without hesitation. She had spent most of her life working alongside service staff and saw nothing humiliating about helping someone overwhelmed during a busy event. Carrying the tray carefully through the crowd, she moved quietly between guests while the orchestra continued playing in the background. Several people ignored her completely. Others stepped aside assuming she worked there. Then, as Evelyn turned near the center of the ballroom, someone bumped lightly into her shoulder from behind. The tray tilted slightly. A small drop of red wine splashed onto the edge of Veronica Hale's silver designer gown. The entire atmosphere changed instantly. Veronica stared down at the stain in disbelief. For one long second, nobody moved. Evelyn immediately apologized and reached gently toward the fabric as though trying to help. "I'm so sorry," she said calmly. "It was an accident." But Veronica's expression transformed into something guests nearby would later describe as frightening, not because of the stain itself, because of what Evelyn represented in that moment: embarrassment, disorder, imperfection. In front of powerful people, Veronica felt humiliated by someone she believed beneath her. And for a woman obsessed with status, humiliation was unbearable. Then came the slap. The sound echoed violently through the ballroom as Veronica struck Evelyn across the face with enough force to nearly knock her backward into the serving table behind her. A champagne glass crashed against the marble floor. The orchestra stopped playing mid-note. One woman gasped loudly while several guests froze completely, unable to process what they had just witnessed. Evelyn slowly raised her trembling hand to her cheek, her eyes lowering briefly toward the ground. But what unsettled people most was her expression afterward. There was no anger in her face, no rage, no screaming, only disappointment. Deep, painful disappointment, like someone finally witnessing a truth they had hoped was not real. Then Adrian arrived. Pushing through the crowd after hearing the commotion, he stopped the second he saw his mother standing there trembling while Veronica remained furious beside her. Witnesses later claimed Adrian looked physically shattered in that moment, as though two completely different worlds inside his life had suddenly collided in the worst possible way. Veronica began trying to explain herself immediately, but Adrian barely heard her. His eyes never left Evelyn. The woman who sacrificed everything for him now stood humiliated in front of hundreds of strangers because of the woman he planned to marry. Years of trust cracked apart inside him within seconds. And then Evelyn quietly looked at her son and said the words that ended everything. "It's okay, son. Now you finally see who she really is." The moment Adrian Cole finished speaking, the ballroom exploded into confusion. Guests who had spent the evening laughing beneath crystal chandeliers now stood frozen in clusters, whispering nervously while security attempted to control the growing panic spreading through the mansion. Several people pulled out their phones immediately. Others tried pretending nothing had happened while quietly moving toward exits to avoid being seen near the scandal unfolding in front of them. Veronica Hale remained motionless beside the serving table, her face pale as the reality of what she had done finally settled over her. Only minutes earlier, she had been smiling for photographers beside the man she planned to marry. Now hundreds of guests were staring at her with a mixture of shock and disgust, while Adrian Cole stood beside his mother, refusing to even look in her direction. Within moments, The engagement party transformed from a glamorous celebration into public humiliation on a national level. By 9:14 p.m., the first video clip from inside the ballroom appeared online. One shaky recording captured the exact moment Veronica slapped Evelyn across the face, while horrified guests gasped in the background. Another showed Adrian rushing toward his mother seconds later. By midnight, major celebrity blogs and financial news sites were already publishing breaking headlines across social media. Billionaire's fiancé slaps elderly woman at engagement party. Luxury engagement turns violent inside Manhattan mansion. Who is Adrian Cole? The story spread faster than anyone inside the Harrison estate could contain it. Millions of people watched the footage overnight. Some criticized Veronica immediately. Others defended her without understanding the full story. But the most damaging detail was not the slap itself. It was Adrian's reaction afterward, the coldness in his face when he realized what happened. The heartbreak. People recognized instantly that something inside him had shattered publicly. According to several witnesses, Adrian escorted Evelyn out of the ballroom personally while refusing to answer questions from guests or reporters waiting outside the estate. Veronica allegedly tried following them at one point, but Adrian stopped walking only long enough to say 6 devastating words. "Don't come near my mother again."
If you are
Then
still
he left.
watching, absolutely you are enjoying this movie. Please don't forget to hit the like button. And please don't forget to subscribe to this channel. And also drop a comment and letting me know where you are watching from. Stay tuned till the end. Thank you.
While online speculation exploded, some people believed the relationship was already over. Others assumed the situation would quietly disappear after a public apology. But behind closed doors, Adrian was beginning to uncover truths far more disturbing than one violent moment at a party. Because after the shock faded, one question kept repeating inside his mind. How many warnings had he ignored about Veronica Hale? The investigation began quietly. Adrian started speaking to people he had overlooked for years: house staff, drivers, executive assistants, former employees who left suddenly without explanation. At first, most seemed hesitant to talk openly. Veronica's influence frightened people even now, but gradually, disturbing patterns started emerging. One former assistant described crying in a restroom after Veronica publicly insulted her appearance during a charity event. Another employee admitted Veronica regularly threatened workers she disliked with termination or legal action. A driver claimed Veronica once forced him to wait outside during a snowstorm for nearly 3 hours because she did not want service people sitting inside the lobby of a luxury hotel. Several former household employees reportedly signed confidentiality agreements after quitting unexpectedly. Adrian listened to every story in stunned silence. And the deeper he looked, the worse things became. Financial records later revealed Veronica secretly paid a former assistant to stay quiet after accusing her of workplace abuse. Another woman reportedly lost her career in public relations after refusing to manipulate social media stories protecting Veronica's image. Employees described emotional outbursts, screaming fits, and calculated cruelty hidden carefully beneath her polished public reputation. Yet what disturbed Adrian most was realizing how often he had witnessed small signs himself and chosen to ignore them. He remembered Veronica mocking restaurant staff during vacations, complaining about ordinary people, embarrassing her at events, rolling her eyes whenever he spoke about his childhood or his mother's working-class background. At the time, Adrian convinced himself these moments were harmless flaws. Now they looked like warnings he refused to see because he wanted desperately to believe he had finally found someone to build a future with. But while Adrian investigated Veronica's past, another truth slowly emerged about Adrian Cole. 3 days after the engagement disaster, Adrian visited his mother privately at her small waterfront home outside Boston. According to one source close to the family, Evelyn appeared surprisingly calm considering the media storm surrounding them. She showed no interest in defending herself publicly, and refused every interview request reporters sent her way. Instead, she asked Adrian one painful question almost immediately after he arrived. "Did you really never notice who she was?" Adrian reportedly sat in silence for nearly a full minute before answering. And during that conversation, Evelyn finally admitted something that changed everything. She had intentionally hidden her identity at the engagement party. At first, Adrian refused to believe it, but Evelyn explained quietly that she wanted to understand the true character of the woman her son planned to marry before the wedding happened. She knew Veronica respected wealth and power, so Evelyn removed both from the equation entirely. No designer clothing, no security escorts, no public introduction as Adrian's mother. She wanted Veronica to encounter someone she believed had no status at all. According to Evelyn, the way people treat strangers tells you more than the way they treat family. What happened at the party confirmed every fear she carried privately for months. Veronica did not simply lose her temper over a wine stain. She revealed exactly who she was when she believed nobody important was watching. But even that revelation was not the biggest secret Evelyn had been hiding. 2 weeks after the engagement collapsed, Adrian received an unexpected call from Jonathan Mercer, the family attorney who had quietly handled Cole Capital legal affairs for over 20 years. Mercer requested a private meeting immediately, refusing to discuss details over the phone. According to insiders familiar with the conversation, Adrian arrived expecting another legal issue connected to Veronica or the media fallout surrounding the scandal. Instead, Jonathan Mercer opened a confidential file and revealed information so shocking Adrian reportedly stood up from his chair in disbelief. Evelyn Cole secretly owned 40% of Cole Capital. Not through inheritance, not through gifts from Adrian, she had owned it from the beginning. Years earlier, when Adrian struggled to secure financing for his first construction company, Evelyn quietly invested every dollar she saved over decades of exhausting work. She mortgaged the only property she owned without telling him. She signed legal documents making herself a silent founding partner while insisting Adrian build the company under his own name. As the business expanded into a billion-dollar empire, Evelyn refused public recognition entirely. She never wanted power. Never wanted headlines. She only wanted her son protected, which meant that on the night Veronica slapped her publicly inside the Harrison estate, she unknowingly humiliated one of the wealthiest women connected to the company she desperately hoped to join through marriage. And somehow, that still was not the worst secret Evelyn had hidden from her son. Because before Adrian could even process the truth about the company ownership, Jonathan Mercer slowly closed the file in front of him, looked him directly in the eye, and quietly said words that changed the entire story once again. "There's something else your mother never told you." Jonathan Mercer did not speak immediately after revealing that Evelyn Cole secretly owned 40% of Cole Capital. Instead, the veteran attorney sat quietly across from Adrian inside the private conference room overlooking downtown Manhattan, while rain struck the windows behind them in slow, uneven patterns. Adrian remained frozen in his chair, trying to process everything he had learned within the last hour. His mother had hidden ownership of the company he spent years building. She had intentionally concealed her identity from Veronica, and now Mercer was telling him there was still another secret waiting beneath all of it. According to sources familiar with the meeting, Adrian looked emotionally exhausted for the first time in years. Not angry, not confused, exhausted. Like someone suddenly realizing his entire understanding of the people closest to him had been incomplete all along. Then Jonathan Mercer finally opened another file and quietly slid several old documents across the table toward him. What Adrian saw changed everything. The documents were nearly 20 years old: loan applications, legal disputes, corporate filings, failed acquisition records. At first glance, they appeared unrelated to the engagement scandal entirely, but one name repeated across every page: Richard Hale, Veronica's father. Adrian reportedly stared at the documents for several seconds before slowly looking back at Mercer in disbelief. Because buried inside those records was proof that long before Veronica entered his life, long before Cole Capital became one of the largest investment firms in America, Richard Hale had nearly destroyed Adrian's first company completely. During Adrian's early construction years, Hale Investments allegedly attempted to force his struggling business into bankruptcy through manipulated contracts and predatory financing agreements designed to crush smaller competitors. Adrian never discovered who orchestrated the attacks at the time because the deals were hidden behind shell corporations and silent investors. But Evelyn knew. She had always known. According to Jonathan Mercer, Evelyn uncovered Richard Hale's involvement years earlier after hearing a private investigator when Adrian's business mysteriously began collapsing despite strong profits. The investigation revealed financial pressure campaigns connected quietly back to Hale Investments. Mercer explained that Evelyn chose not to tell Adrian everything immediately because his company was already surviving crisis after crisis, and she feared hatred would consume him if he learned the truth too early. Instead, she focused on protecting him financially behind the scenes while he rebuilt the business stronger than before. But when Veronica Hale entered Adrian's life years later, Evelyn recognized the family name instantly. She warned her son carefully at first, not with accusations. With concern, she questioned the speed of the relationship, the obsession with status, the emotional distance she sensed beneath Veronica's charm, but Adrian ignored every warning because by then he believed the past no longer mattered. What made the truth even more painful was realizing Evelyn never hated Veronica because of her family name alone. She feared her because she recognized the same behavior she once saw destroy people years earlier: power without empathy, wealth without compassion. And according to Mercer, Evelyn became increasingly terrified after noticing Veronica's growing influence over Adrian's personal life. She watched him withdraw from old friendships, avoid conversations about his upbringing, spend less time reconnecting with the ordinary people who grounded him emotionally. Slowly, the son she raised to value dignity over status began reshaping himself around a woman obsessed with appearances. That was when Evelyn decided she needed certainty before the wedding happened, not suspicion, proof, which was why she walked into the Harrison estate that night dressed like an ordinary woman instead of the silent co-owner of Adrian's empire. Hours after learning the truth, Adrian requested a private meeting with Veronica at the Hale family's Manhattan penthouse. According to insiders close to both families, the atmosphere inside the apartment felt more like a legal interrogation than a conversation between two people once planning a wedding together. Veronica reportedly appeared emotionally drained, her public image already collapsing online, while media outlets continued replaying footage from the engagement disaster. But despite everything happening around her, she still seemed convinced Adrian would eventually forgive her. That belief disappeared the moment he placed the documents connected to Richard Hale across the table in front of her. Witnesses later claimed Veronica's entire expression changed after seeing her father's name attached to the records. For the first time since the scandal began, she looked genuinely afraid. Adrian asked only one question at first: "Did you know?" Veronica denied everything immediately. She insisted she never understood the full details of her father's business history, claimed she was young when the financial attacks happened, claimed Richard Hale shielded her from corporate conflicts throughout childhood. But as Adrian continued confronting her with testimony from former employees, hidden settlements, and stories of emotional abuse toward workers, Veronica's composure slowly started breaking apart. Not because she felt guilt over Evelyn, because she felt exposed. Years of carefully controlling her image suddenly collapsed all at once, and according to one source, Veronica eventually stopped defending herself entirely before shouting something that stunned even Adrian. "Everyone judges me," she screamed through tears. "You think I wanted to grow up that way? My entire life was about survival. Appear weak and people destroy you. Trust the wrong person and they use you. That's what I was taught. For a moment, Adrian reportedly said nothing. Because beneath Veronica's cruelty was someone emotionally damaged in ways he had never fully understood. She grew up inside a world where love depended on perfection. Status determined safety. Mistakes brought humiliation. Her mother trained her to fear weakness so intensely that compassion itself became dangerous to her. Veronica learned to control people before they could reject her, learned to humiliate others before anyone could embarrass her first. None of it excused what happened to Evelyn Cole, but for the first time, Adrian understood something painful. Veronica was not pretending to be heartless. She genuinely believed coldness was necessary to survive. Days later, tensions between the Cole and Hale families reached their breaking point during a private executive meeting held inside Cole Capital headquarters. Lawyers lined the conference room walls, while senior executives sat silently reviewing confidential financial documents connected to Evelyn's ownership stake in the company. Richard Hale himself reportedly attended the meeting alongside Veronica, though witnesses claimed he appeared far less confident than usual. Adrian entered the room beside Evelyn, and several executives later admitted they were shocked by how different she looked outside the engagement party. Calm, composed, commanding. The same elderly woman mistaken for service staff now carried herself with the authority of someone who quietly shaped the company from the beginning. And then Evelyn finally revealed the full truth. Long before Adrian became wealthy, Evelyn personally negotiated the first financial agreements keeping his business alive during its worst years. She used savings from decades of exhausting work, mortgaged property, sold jewelry left behind by her late husband. She attended early meetings silently while investors ignored her presence entirely, assuming she was merely Adrian's mother waiting nearby. Meanwhile, Evelyn studied every contract herself and noticed dangers Adrian missed because of his inexperience. According to Jonathan Mercer, several executives inside the room reportedly realized for the first time that Cole Capital might never have survived without her decisions behind the scenes. Adrian sat quietly listening while his mother described sacrifices he never even knew existed. Then came the moment everyone understood. There was no future left for Adrian and Veronica. Without raising his voice, Adrian slowly removed the engagement ring from his finger and placed it carefully on the conference table between them. The room fell completely silent. Veronica stared at the ring for several seconds before her composure finally collapsed entirely. Witnesses claimed she looked less angry than devastated, like someone realizing too late that the life she spent years trying to build had disappeared permanently within days. Richard Hale attempted speaking at one point, but Adrian reportedly ignored him completely. The engagement was over, publicly, irreversibly. And just when it seemed the nightmare had finally reached its end, something even worse happened. As executives began standing from the table and lawyers gathered documents quietly around the room, Evelyn suddenly lost balance beside Adrian. Witnesses described hearing her breathing change moments before she collapsed directly onto the conference room floor. Panic erupted instantly. Adrian dropped beside her screaming for medical assistance, while executives rushed backward in shock. Evelyn's eyes fluttered weakly as paramedics arrived minutes later, and emergency equipment flooded the room with sharp mechanical sounds. Adrian reportedly refused to leave her side during the ambulance ride, gripping her hand so tightly that hospital staff later described him as barely able to speak. And as hospital monitors echoed through the darkness of the intensive care unit later that night, Adrian Cole realized the woman who spent her entire life protecting him might now be dying. By sunrise, the storm outside the hospital had finally begun to fade, but Adrian Cole remained sitting beside his mother's bed without sleeping. The machines surrounding Evelyn filled the room with soft mechanical sounds, while pale morning light pushed slowly through the curtains behind her. For the first time since childhood, Adrian looked completely helpless. The billionaire investors feared. The businessman newspapers described as emotionally untouchable. The man capable of negotiating billion-dollar deals without changing expression now sat holding his mother's hand like a frightened little boy, terrified of losing the only person who ever loved him before the money arrived. Several nurses later admitted they barely recognized him from television. There was no arrogance left in him anymore. No distance, only grief. Hours earlier, doctors confirmed what Evelyn had hidden for months. Terminal cancer. Advanced, aggressive, untreatable. Adrian reportedly stared at the doctor in disbelief when he heard the diagnosis because nothing about it made sense to him. His mother never complained, never asked for sympathy, never allowed anyone to worry about her. Even while carrying a deadly illness quietly inside her body, she continued protecting him emotionally until the very end. When Adrian finally confronted Evelyn after she regained consciousness, asking why she hid something so serious from him, witnesses said she smiled sadly before answering in the calm voice he remembered from childhood. "Because you finally looked happy," she whispered, "and I didn't want my sickness becoming another burden you carried." Then Evelyn admitted the truth behind the engagement party. She knew her time was running out. The doctors had already warned her months earlier that treatment was failing, and according to Evelyn, the thought of leaving the world without knowing whether Adrian was truly surrounded by people who loved him terrified her more than dying itself. She had watched her son spend years building wealth powerful enough to attract anyone while slowly becoming emotionally disconnected from the values that once defined him. She feared Veronica Hale represented everything capable of destroying the goodness Adrian spent his entire life trying to protect. That was why she attended the engagement party quietly, why she refused expensive clothing or formal introductions, why she carried the serving tray herself instead of remaining hidden safely beside Adrian. She needed to know the truth before it was too late, not about Veronica's manners, about her character. And the answer arrived with one slap. Adrian reportedly broke down completely after hearing it. For several minutes, he could barely speak through the tears because the guilt inside him had become unbearable. He blamed himself for ignoring warning signs, for distancing himself emotionally from his roots, for allowing his mother to stand alone inside a room full of people who valued status more than humanity. But Evelyn stopped him gently before the guilt consumed him entirely. Then she said something doctors, nurses, and even Jonathan Mercer would later remember long after she was gone. "A woman who disrespects the weak," Evelyn whispered softly, "will eventually destroy the people she claims to love." The room fell silent after that, because deep down, Adrian knew she was right. Over the following weeks, something inside Adrian Cole changed permanently. Friends noticed it first, then employees, then the entire business world. He stopped attending luxury social events almost completely. Several expensive properties connected to his public image were quietly sold. He spent more time in Boston reconnecting with former neighbors and old coworkers from the early years before success changed his life. Inside Cole Capital, executives described him as calmer but far more emotionally present than before. He created new protections for service workers across every company connected to his empire. Hospitality employees received expanded healthcare support. Janitorial staff received retirement programs. Former workers struggling financially were quietly contacted and offered assistance. But perhaps the most emotional decision came 3 months after Evelyn's hospitalization, when Adrian officially launched the Evelyn Cole Foundation, an organization dedicated entirely to supporting elderly workers forced to continue laboring through illness or poverty long after society stopped noticing them. At the opening ceremony, Adrian refused standing ovations. Instead, he spoke briefly about dignity, about invisible sacrifices, about people the world overlooks until it needs them. Many people watching the speech admitted it felt less like a billionaire giving a corporate presentation and more like a son trying to honor the woman who saved his life repeatedly, without ever asking for recognition in return. And while Adrian slowly rebuilt himself emotionally, Veronica Hale disappeared almost completely from public life. For months, tabloids chased rumors about where she went after the engagement collapsed. Some claimed she moved overseas. Others reported she entered treatment for emotional exhaustion following the scandal. But according to one former friend, Veronica spent most of that time isolated inside a luxury apartment surrounded by silence she no longer knew how to escape. The wealth remained. The status remained. But the image she built her entire identity around had shattered publicly in front of millions of people. What haunted her most was not losing the engagement itself. It was realizing too late that Adrian Cole never hated her because she lacked perfection. Evelyn feared her because she lacked compassion. And for perhaps the first time in her life, Veronica could no longer hide from that truth. Those close to her later claimed she changed quietly afterward. Less cruel, less obsessed with appearances, still emotionally damaged, but no longer pretending power alone could protect her from loneliness. And somehow, that made the ending even sadder. Because in another life, under different circumstances, Veronica Hale might have become someone entirely different. 6 months after Evelyn's death, Adrian returned alone to the small Boston diner where his mother once worked double shifts while raising him as a child. The restaurant barely changed over the years. Same cracked counter stools, same faded menus, same old coffee machines humming softly near the kitchen entrance. Adrian sat quietly in the corner booth where he used to wait for Evelyn after school while rain tapped gently against the windows outside. One former waitress recognized him immediately and approached carrying an old storage box she said Evelyn left behind years earlier. Inside were photographs, receipts, handwritten notes, and a small videotape labeled simply with Adrian's name. Later that night, Adrian watched the recording alone. The video showed Evelyn smiling into an old camera while standing outside the diner decades earlier, long before the mansions and private jets ever existed. Her hair was darker then, her face younger, but her eyes carried the same warmth Adrian remembered from childhood. She spoke casually at first, laughing softly while talking about work and ordinary life. Then her expression turned serious for a moment before she looked directly into the camera and said words that would stay with Adrian forever. "Real wealth is not money, Adrian. It's the people who still love you when you have nothing." Adrian reportedly replayed the message 3 times before finally breaking down crying alone inside the dark apartment. And on a cold, rainy evening not long afterward, witnesses spotted him standing silently outside that same diner where Evelyn once worked endless night shifts to keep them alive. No security team, no expensive suit, no cameras, just Adrian Cole standing beneath the rain staring through the windows at the ordinary place where the most important person in his life sacrificed everything so he could someday become more than poverty expected him to be. And as the rain continued falling across the empty street, one question still lingered long after the scandal itself faded from headlines. Would Veronica Hale have acted differently if she knew Adrian Cole truly was? Or did that single slap simply reveal the kind of person she had been all along? Stories like this stay with people because they force us to confront uncomfortable questions about human nature, pride, forgiveness, and the way we treat others when we believe nobody important is watching. Adrian Cole spent most of his life building an empire powerful enough to earn the respect of the world, only to discover that the most important lesson he would ever learn had nothing to do with money at all. It came from the woman who quietly sacrificed everything for him without demanding recognition in return. Adrian Cole never cared about status, luxury, or public approval. She cared about character. And in the end, one single moment inside a ballroom filled with wealthy strangers exposed truths years of appearances managed to hide. But this story also leaves behind painful questions people still debate online even now. Do you think Adrian should have forgiven Veronica Hale after everything that happened? Was Veronica truly heartless, or was she simply shaped by a cold world that taught her weakness was dangerous? And was Evelyn right to hide her identity in order to test the woman her son planned to marry? Or did that decision push events toward disaster before anyone had the chance to change? Most importantly, what would you have done if you were standing in Adrian Cole's position that night inside the Harrison estate? Would you have walked away forever? Or would you have tried to save someone already broken long before you met them? Let us know your thoughts down in the comments, because stories like this often reveal more about ourselves than the people involved in them. And if this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe and
That
turn
brings us
on
to the
notifications.
end of this amazing video, and I hope you enjoy every moment of it. If you did, please make sure you like this video, leave a comment with your favorite scene, and let know where you are watching from. And please don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you never miss the next movie upload. Thanks for watching.